I always knew Margaret would be successful. From the time we were kids, she had that spark, that perfect mix of charm and ruthlessness that spelled success in the business world. I was the quiet one, the studious one, the one our parents described as sweet, while they bragged about Margaret's latest achievement. My name is Sarah Chen, and this is the story of how I learned that being underestimated can be your greatest advantage. Growing up, Margaret was always the star of the family. While I spent my weekends buried in business textbooks, she was winning debate competitions and running successful fundraisers. Your sister has a natural talent for business, our father would say, beaming with pride as Margaret counted the profits from her latest school venture. I didn't mind, not really. I had my own dreams, my own plans. While Margaret focused on flash and immediate results, I studied market trends, business psychology, and innovative management techniques. I was playing the long game, even if nobody else saw it. After college, Margaret landed a prestigious position at Anderson and Brooks, one of the top consulting firms in the city. Within 2 years, she was leading her own team. I took a different path, starting at a smaller firm where I could learn every aspect of the business from the ground up. Still working at that little company, Margaret would ask during family dinners, her voice dripping with condescension. You know, I could put in a word for you at Anderson and Brooks. Entry level, of course, but it would be a start. I would just smile and change the subject. What Margaret didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I was building something of my own. Every client interaction, every project, every late night poring over reports was teaching me something valuable. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. It started with a simple email from James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies. His company was growing rapidly, and he needed help managing the expansion. He'd heard about me through a mutual connection and wanted to meet. I spent weeks preparing for that meeting, analyzing his company from every angle, developing strategies that would help him scale effectively while maintaining the innovation that had made his company successful. The meeting went better than I could have hoped. James was impressed by my thorough understanding of his business and my practical approach to solving his challenges. You get it, he said, leaning back in his chair. You actually understand what we're trying to build here. That night, I couldn't wait to share my success with my family. We were having our regular Sunday dinner, and for once I had something that could match Margaret's endless stream of achievements. Morrison Technologies. Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. James Morrison. The James Morrison? I nodded, trying to contain my excitement. He signed an exclusive consulting contract with me. We're starting next month. The table went silent. Even our parents, who usually hung on Margaret's every word, were staring at me in shock. That's impossible, Margaret sputtered. Morrison Technologies is worth billions. They wouldn't trust their expansion to someone from a tiny firm like yours. Well, they did, I said quietly, taking a sip of wine to hide my smile. Margaret's face went through a series of expressions before settling into something that looked almost predatory. You know, Sarah, she said, her voice honey-sweet, this is actually perfect timing. I've been thinking about making a change, striking out on my own. Maybe we could work together on this. You could really use my experience. Warning bells went off in my head. Margaret had never shown any interest in working with me before. But before I could respond, our parents jumped in. What a wonderful idea, Mom clasped her hands together. You two working together, it would be perfect. Margaret could handle the important client meetings and Sarah, you could do all the background work. Dad nodded enthusiastically. Your sister's right, Sarah. This is too big for you to handle alone. You need Margaret's expertise. I looked around the table, at Mom and Dad's eager faces, at Margaret's calculating smile, and for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. Thanks, but no thanks, I said firmly. I've got this handled. Margaret's smile disappeared. Don't be stupid, Sarah. You've never handled anything this big before. You'll mess it up without my help. I appreciate your concern, I replied, standing up, but I've worked hard for this opportunity and I'm going to see it through on my own. I left before they could argue further, but I could feel Margaret's eyes burning into my back as I walked out. The next few weeks were intense but exhilarating. Working with Morrison Technologies was everything I'd hoped for and more. James and his team were receptive to my ideas, and the initial results were promising. Then the whispers started. First, it was just a few odd comments from clients. I heard you're partnering with your sister on this, one said. That must be exciting. No, I corrected them. I'm handling this independently. But the whispers grew louder. Somehow, word was spreading that Margaret was involved in the Morrison Technologies project. I started getting emails addressed to both of us, meeting invitations that included her name. Finally, James called me into his office, looking concerned. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, shuffling through some papers on his desk. "I'm a bit confused. I've been getting calls from your sister, discussing our project plans." My blood ran cold. "What?" He slid a business card across the desk. It was Margaret's new card, freshly printed with her own consulting firm's logo. And there, under her name, were the words, "Lead Consultant, Morrison Technologies Project." "She's been reaching out to our board members," James continued. "She seems to know a lot about our strategic plans. Said you had brought her in as a partner." "I did not," I said, my voice shaking. "I would never." "She's very convincing," James said gently. "She had details about our discussions, about the strategies we've been developing." That's when I realized Margaret had accessed my laptop during that family dinner. I'd left it in the study while we ate, and she must have copied my files. All my careful plans, all my strategic analysis, everything I'd worked so hard to develop. She's stolen it all. The next few days were a blur of damage control. I tried to explain to James what had happened, but Margaret had already sunk her claws in deep. She convinced several board members that she was the real business genius behind the strategies, that I was just the detail person who'd helped with the grunt work. It all came to a head at the next board meeting. I walked in to find Margaret already there, perfectly poised in her designer's suit, presenting my ideas as her own. As I was explaining to the board, she said smoothly as I entered, "My sister's initial work provided a good foundation, but what you really need is someone with high-level experience to execute these strategies properly." I stood there, watching as she displayed slides I had created, discussed concepts I had developed, all while our parents' words echoed in my head. "This is too big for you to handle alone." When Margaret finished her presentation, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sarah, dear, why don't you share your thoughts? I'm sure you have some minor details to add." That was the moment everything changed. Looking at my sister's smug face, at the board members nodding along with her, something inside me snapped, but not in the way they expected. I smiled back, gathered my things, and walked out without saying a word. Margaret had won this battle. She could have Morrison Technologies, but she just taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Trust no one. Document everything, and always have a backup plan. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by years of research, client notes, and business plans. Margaret might have stolen my biggest client, but she hadn't stolen my brain, my experience, or my determination. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Phoenix Consulting. It was time to rise from the ashes. The first thing I did after losing Morrison Technologies was document everything. Every email, every presentation, every strategy document I created. I compiled it all into a detailed portfolio, not for legal action, but for something more valuable, proof of my capabilities. Margaret might have stolen my work, but she couldn't steal my process. I spent the next month rebuilding from scratch. During the day, I continued working at my small firm, but my nights were dedicated to developing Phoenix Consulting. I wasn't just creating a business. I was creating something that would change the entire industry's approach to strategic growth. While Margaret focused on flashy presentations and big promises, I developed a unique methodology combining data analytics with human-centered design thinking. It wasn't sexy, but it was revolutionary. "You're making a mistake," my mother said during one of her guilt trip phone calls. "Margaret's doing so well with Morrison Technologies. She could still bring you in." I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom, I have to go. I'm meeting with investors." That wasn't entirely true. I was actually reviewing startup incubator applications. I'd realized something while watching Margaret steal my work. The real opportunities weren't with established corporations like Morrison Technologies. They were with innovative startups that needed help scaling effectively. The first break came from an unexpected source. Lisa Zhang, a former colleague from my small firm days, had joined a promising AI startup called Neuratech. They were brilliant at technology but struggling with business development. "Their tech is amazing," Lisa told me over coffee, "but they need help translating it into actual market success." I remembered how you helped scale that healthcare app last year. I spent that night reviewing Neurotech's business model and developing a preliminary strategy. By morning, I had a detailed proposal that showed exactly how they could optimize their growth while maintaining their innovative edge. The meeting with Neurotech's founders went differently than my Morrison Technologies presentation. Instead of trying to impress them with industry jargon and flashy slides, I focused on demonstrating deep understanding of their specific challenges. You're not just throwing buzzwords at us. Dr. Adams, their lead developer, said afterward. You actually understand the technology and its potential. They signed with Phoenix Consulting that day, my first major client as an independent consultant. Meanwhile, Margaret was living her dream at Morrison Technologies. Her Instagram was full of power poses in front of corporate logos and humble brag posts about leading the biggest tech expansion in the city's history. What she didn't post about were the growing problems with her implementation of my strategies. She'd understood the words in my plans but not the underlying principles. It was like someone following a recipe without understanding cooking. One small change could ruin the entire dish. I heard through industry contacts that projects were running behind schedule, costs were spiraling, and team morale was plummeting. Margaret's solution was to call more meetings and create more PowerPoint presentations. But I was too busy to gloat. Neurotech's success with my methods had caught attention in the startup community. Suddenly, my inbox was full of inquiries from other innovative companies looking for similar results. I hired Lisa away from her job to help manage the growing workload. Then I brought in David Martinez, a brilliant data analyst I'd worked with on previous projects. Within 6 months, Phoenix Consulting had grown to a team of 10, each person carefully chosen for their expertise and commitment to our methodology. 1 year after Margaret's betrayal, I was sitting in my new office reviewing quarterly reports when Lisa burst in. Have you seen this? She asked, holding up her phone. It was a news article about Morrison Technologies. The stock had dropped 30% after a disastrous quarterly report. The ambitious expansion Margaret had been managing had failed spectacularly. Sources inside the company cite mismanagement and poor strategic planning as key factors in the downturn. The article read, several board members have called for a complete review of all recent strategic initiatives. I set the phone down and turned back to my work. I had proposals to review for 3 new clients, all referred by satisfied customers. That weekend, during our mandatory family dinner, Margaret was uncharacteristically quiet. The usual designer outfit was replaced with something off the rack, and dark circles showed through her carefully applied makeup. The market is just volatile right now, she said defensively when Dad asked about the Morrison Technologies news. Everything's under control. I have a plan. I focused on my food, but I could feel her eyes on me throughout the meal. Finally, as I was helping Mom clear the dishes, Margaret followed me into the kitchen. Look, she said, voice low. I know we've had our differences, but I need your help. The board is breathing down my neck, and nothing's working like it did in your original plans. I placed the dishes in the sink carefully before turning to face her. Nothing's working because you don't understand the underlying principles. You stole the what but didn't comprehend the why. I can pay you, she pressed on as if I hadn't spoken. Morrison Technologies has a generous consulting budget. No, I said simply. Don't be petty, she snapped, mask slipping. This is business. I need those strategies updated. Those weren't just strategies, Margaret. They were a complete methodology that required understanding the company's DNA, their team dynamics, their true potential. You can't just copy and paste success. Oh, and I suppose you're some kind of business genius now, she sneered. I saw your little startup clients. Playing with companies nobody's ever heard of. I pulled out my phone and pulled up Phoenix Consulting's latest financial report. Here are the numbers for my little company. We're projecting 300% growth this quarter. Every single one of our clients has exceeded their growth targets, and we have a waiting list of companies wanting to work with us. Margaret's face went pale as she looked at the figures. How? That's impossible. You've only been operating for a year. I've been operating my whole life, Margaret. While you were focused on looking successful, I was learning how to create success. Real, sustainable, repeatable success. The next month, everything fell apart for Margaret. The Morrison Technologies board called for an independent audit of all her work. When they discovered most of her strategies were copied from my original proposals and poorly implemented, They terminated her contract immediately. Margaret always seemed more focused on taking credit than delivering results. I overheard one board member tell another at an industry event. The real question is, who actually developed those initial strategies? They were brilliant, just badly executed. I didn't step forward to claim credit. I didn't have to. My success was speaking for itself. Phoenix Consulting continued to grow. We moved into larger offices, expanded our team, and developed new methodologies for different types of businesses. Our client success stories attracted attention from major business publications. The Phoenix Approach: How a Boutique Consulting Firm is Revolutionizing Business Growth, read the headline in Business Weekly. The article detailed our unique methodology and outstanding success rate, featuring interviews with satisfied clients and industry experts. Margaret tried to rebuild her reputation, but her association with the Morrison Technologies failure followed her. She started her own consulting firm, attempting to copy Phoenix's methods, but without understanding the fundamental principles, she couldn't replicate our success. Then came the final blow. James Morrison himself reached out to me. "I made a mistake," he said during our meeting. "I let politics and flashy presentations distract me from what really mattered: actual results. Would you consider taking Morrison Technologies back as a client?" Under new management, of course. I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. I appreciate the offer, but Phoenix Consulting is focused on working with innovative companies that are trying to build something meaningful. I'd be happy to refer you to some other consultants who might be a better fit. The look of shock on his face was priceless. The Sarah Chen of 2 years ago would never have turned down such a prestigious client. But I wasn't that person anymore. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at the annual Business Innovation Summit, the same event where Margaret had once mockingly suggested I could hand out programs. My keynote speech would be about authentic leadership and sustainable business growth. The day before the summit, I received a text from Margaret. "I heard you're speaking tomorrow. Mom and Dad want to know if you can get them VIP passes." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "The event is sold out, but I heard they're streaming it online. Registration is $500 per person. Maybe you can expense it to your new company?" Oh wait, perhaps that was petty, but after years of condescension and manipulation, it felt good to finally stand my ground. The morning of the summit, I stood at the podium looking out over a sea of eager faces, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and innovators who were there to learn from my experience. In the middle of my speech about authentic success and sustainable growth, I spotted a familiar face in the back of the room. Margaret had bought a ticket after all. She sat there in her off-the-rack suit, frantically taking notes as I explained the principles she had never understood. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something new in her expression: respect. After the speech, my phone buzzed with a notification. Margaret had posted on LinkedIn, "Congratulations to my sister Sarah Chen on an inspiring keynote at #BI Summit. Your success is well deserved." I should have listened years ago. I smiled and slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Today, Phoenix Consulting has offices in 3 cities and a team of 50 brilliant professionals. Our client waiting list is months long, and we're constantly developing new ways to help innovative companies achieve sustainable growth. Margaret? Last I heard, she was filing for bankruptcy protection for her failed consulting firm. Mom still brings up at every family dinner how I should help her out, give her a job at Phoenix. I just smile and change the subject. Some people never learn, but I did. Success isn't about who can shout the loudest or take credit the fastest. It's about understanding, innovation, and staying true to your principles. And sometimes the quiet ones really do finish first. The day I discovered my husband had emptied our savings account, I was standing in line at Whole Foods, watching the cashier void items from my grocery order one by one because my card kept declining. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, my face burning as other customers shifted impatiently behind me. "There must be some mistake. Could you try it again?" The cashier's pitying look only made it worse. I knew my account should have had over $50,000 in it, the remains of my inheritance from Brana Rose, carefully saved over the past 5 years of marriage. My name is Julia Parker, and that humiliating moment in the grocery store was just the beginning of discovering how thoroughly my husband had betrayed my trust. I'd met Daniel at a charity gala 6 years ago. I was there representing the investment firm where I worked as a junior analyst. He was a rising star at a prestigious law firm. He seemed different from the other lawyers I'd met. Warmer, funnier, more down to earth. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Daniel was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and opinions. "You're not like other women," he'd say, making me feel special even as something in the back of my mind whispered that this wasn't actually a compliment. We married after a year of dating. The wedding was everything I dreamed of, paid for mostly by my grandmother's inheritance. She passed away just months before I met Daniel, leaving me a modest but significant sum. "You've always been the practical one," she told me during one of our last conversations. "Promise me you'll invest this wisely, make it grow." I nodded, holding her frail hand. "I promise, Grandma." And I have been practical. At first, I kept most of the inheritance in a separate savings account, using only a small portion for the wedding and our first home's down payment. Daniel had his own money from his law practice, and we agreed to maintain some financial independence while sharing household expenses. The problem started subtly. Daniel would talk about investment opportunities that seemed too good to be true. "It's a sure thing," he'd say, eyes bright with excitement. "We could double our money in months." I'd express skepticism, drawing on my financial background to point out the risks. He'd grow defensive, accusing me of not supporting his ambitions. To keep the peace, I'd eventually agree to small investments, always from our joint account, never from my inheritance. Some of these ventures paid off, feeding his confidence. Others failed, but Daniel always had explanations that shifted blame elsewhere. Still, we were doing well enough that I didn't worry too much. His law practice was thriving, and my career at the investment firm was advancing steadily. Then came the day he discovered online poker. It started innocently enough, a few games in the evening to unwind after work. I didn't think much of it at first. Daniel had always been competitive, and this seemed like a harmless way to channel that energy. But soon he was playing every night, sometimes until dawn. He'd skip dinner, forget appointments, and snap at me if I suggested he take a break. The laptop screen's glow became a constant presence in our bedroom, accompanied by the soft click of keys and occasional muttered curses. "You're working too hard," he'd say when I expressed concern about his late nights. "I'm just having a little fun. Besides, I'm actually pretty good at this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that my Harvard-educated lawyer husband knew what he was doing. But the signs were there if I'd been willing to see them. The credit card bills started climbing. Small charges at first, $50 here, $100 there, all to online gaming sites. Then larger amounts. When I questioned them, Daniel would grow defensive. "I earn good money," he'd say, his voice taking on that edge I'd learned to dread. "I can spend it how I want." But it wasn't just his money he was spending. I discovered he'd been moving funds from our joint account to cover his gaming losses. Still, the inheritance account was separate, secure. Or so I thought. What I didn't know then was that while I'd been working late one night, Daniel had found my banking information. He'd watched me enter my passwords enough times to guess them. And once he had access, the temptation proved too strong. The scene at Whole Foods was just the beginning. When I got home and checked my accounts, I felt physically ill. The inheritance account, my safety net, my promise to Grandma Rose, was empty. Every penny transferred to various gambling sites over the past month. I sat in my car in a Whole Foods parking lot, trying to breathe through the panic. That's when I remembered something that made my hands stop shaking. Daniel didn't know about all of my accounts. 2 years ago, I'd made an investment that I'd never told him about. It had seemed insignificant at the time, almost embarrassing in its modesty. A small tech startup was looking for early investors. The founder was a former client who'd broken away from her big tech job to pursue an innovative idea in artificial intelligence. "It's risky," she'd admitted during our lunch meeting. "But I really believe in this technology. We're doing something no one else has tried." I'd studied their business plan carefully, drawing on all my years of investment experience. The technology was revolutionary, a new approach to machine learning that could transform multiple industries. The team was brilliant and dedicated, and the initial investment requirement was surprisingly low. I'd taken $10,000 from my personal account, money I'd saved from my annual bonuses, and invested it privately. I didn't tell Daniel because I knew what he'd say. He called it foolish, risky, a waste of money that could be spent on sure things. The paperwork was in my maiden name, the communications sent to my private email account. It was my secret, my independent decision, my way of proving to myself that I could still make choices without seeking his approval. Now, sitting in my car and staring at my empty inheritance account, I pulled out my phone and checked that private email for the first time in weeks. There were dozens of unread messages from the tech company. My hands trembled as I opened the most recent one. Dear Ms. Matthews, my maiden name. We are pleased to inform you that following our successful Series C funding round and recent acquisition offers, your initial investment of $10,000 has appreciated significantly. Based on current valuations, your equity stake is now worth approximately $3.2 million. I read the number 3 times before it sank in. My small secret investment, the one Daniel would have mocked, had just made me a millionaire. The irony might have made me laugh if I wasn't so angry. While my husband had been gambling away our savings on rigged online poker games, my careful investment in real innovation had paid off beyond my wildest dreams. I sat there in the parking lot watching the sun set behind the grocery store and made a decision. I wouldn't tell Daniel about this windfall. Not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly how deep his gambling problem went and what else he might be hiding from me. I drove home slowly, rehearsing what I would say about the emptied inheritance account. But when I walked through our front door, I realized I didn't need to say anything at all. Daniel was sitting at our dining room table, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses, his laptop open to an online poker site. His usually perfectly styled hair was a mess, his expensive shirt wrinkled and stained. I can explain, he slurred, not meeting my eyes. I had a system, it was working. I just needed a little more capital to make it pay off. I stood there in our tastefully decorated foyer, looking at this man I thought I knew, this brilliant lawyer who turned into a gambling addict before my eyes, and felt nothing but cold clarity. How much did you lose? I asked quietly. He flinched at my tone. It's not about losing. I've got it under control. I just need a little more time, a little more money. How much, Daniel? He named a figure that made my stomach turn. It was more than just my inheritance. He'd taken out loans, maxed out credit cards, even borrowed from clients' escrow accounts. But I've got a tip on a sure thing, he continued, his words running together. This guy I met online, he's got inside information about a poker tournament. If I can just get a stake together. I walked past him to our home office and began methodically going through our files. The more I dug, the worse it got. Our mortgage was months behind. The car loans were in default. Even our health insurance had lapsed. Daniel followed me, still talking, still making excuses. It's my money to lose, he said at one point, his voice taking on that familiar defensive edge. I earned it. I work hard. You don't understand how these things work. I turned to face him, this man who gambled away not just our savings but our future, and felt a strange sense of calm. You're right, I said softly. I don't understand how these things work. I only understand solid investments, careful planning, and actual business strategy. You know, the boring stuff. He didn't catch my sarcasm. He was too busy pulling up his laptop, trying to show me his system for beating the odds at online poker. I left him there, stumbling through explanations of betting strategies and inside tips, and went upstairs to our bedroom. In the back of my closet was a small fireproof safe that Daniel didn't know about. Inside were copies of my most important documents, including the original investment agreement for the tech startup. I took everything to my car, along with enough clothes for a few days. Daniel didn't even notice me leaving. He was too absorbed in his poker game, chasing another loss with money we no longer had. I spent that night in a hotel, methodically making lists and planning my next steps. My investment firm background proved useful. I knew exactly how to document financial fraud and protect assets. The next morning, I visited 3 banks. At the first, I opened a new account in my maiden name. At the second, I transferred my tech investment proceeds as soon as it cleared. At the third, I retrieved everything from our joint safe deposit box, including the jewelry Grandma Rose had left me, which thankfully Daniel didn't know about. Then I called Amanda Torres, a divorce attorney I'd met at a women's leadership conference last year. She listened quietly as I outlined the situation. The gambling, the hidden debt, the theft from client accounts, "This is serious, Julia," she said. "He could face disbarment, possibly criminal charges. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" I thought about all the times Daniel had dismissed my financial concerns, had treated my careful planning as a joke, had made decisions about our future without consulting me. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want everything documented and handled legally. He needs to face the consequences of his actions." Amanda nodded. "I'll start the paperwork. In the meantime, don't confront him about anything. Let him think you're still in the dark about the extent of his gambling. We need to protect your assets before he can do any more damage." I returned to our house that evening to find Daniel still at his laptop, though he'd at least changed clothes. Empty takeout containers littered the kitchen counter. "Where were you?" he asked, barely looking up from his screen. "I tried to use your card for dinner, but it was declined." "At work," I lied smoothly. "There must be some problem with the bank. I'll check on it tomorrow." He grunted, already absorbed back in his game. I watched him for a moment, this stranger who had replaced my brilliant, ambitious husband, and felt a mix of pity and disgust. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of concerned but oblivious wife perfectly. I acted appropriately distressed about our banking problems, while quietly working with Amanda to document every aspect of Daniel's financial misconduct. The evidence was damning. Not only had he emptied our personal accounts, but he'd also misappropriated client funds from his law firm's escrow accounts to cover gambling debts. He'd taken out high-interest loans from questionable sources. He even mortgaged our house a second time by forging my signature. Meanwhile, my secret investment continued to appreciate. The tech company was generating buzz in all the right circles, with major players expressing interest in either acquisition or partnership. Then came the morning I'd been preparing for. I was sitting at our kitchen table when Daniel stumbled downstairs, looking haggard. "Julia," he said, his voice rough, "we need to talk. There's been some financial difficulties." I took a sip of my coffee. "Oh, it's temporary," he rushed to add. "Just a cash flow issue. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to take out a loan against your retirement account." I set my cup down carefully. "Why?" "It's complicated. Some investments didn't pan out as expected, but I have a plan to turn it around. There's this high-stakes game tonight." "No." The word hung in the air between us. Daniel blinked, as if he'd misheard. "What?" I said no. "I won't give you any more money to gamble away." His face darkened. "You don't understand. This is different. I have inside information." "Like you had inside information about the last game, and the one before that. How much have you lost, Daniel? Do you even know?" He stared at me, realization slowly dawning. "You've been checking up on me." "Someone had to. Since you clearly lost the ability to distinguish between gambling and investing." "It's my money," he shouted, mask finally slipping. "I earned it. I have the right to spend it how I want." I pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the table. "Actually, it wasn't just your money. You stole my inheritance. You forged my signature. You embezzled from your clients. Would you like to see the documentation?" His face went pale as I began laying out papers. Bank statements, loan documents, credit card bills, screenshots of his gambling accounts. "How did you?" "I'm an investment analyst, Daniel. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Did you think I wouldn't keep records?" He collapsed into a chair, all the fight draining out of him. "I can explain. To me? Or to the Bar Association? Because they'll be very interested in what happened to those client accounts." "You wouldn't?" "I already have." I stood up, gathering the documents. "The ethics committee received my report this morning. The police should be here soon to discuss the forgery charges." As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance. Daniel's face crumpled. "I'll lose everything," he whispered. "My license, my practice, my reputation." "You already lost everything," I corrected him. "You just didn't know it yet." He looked up at me, desperate now. "I'll get help. I'll go to therapy. We can work this out." "No, Daniel, we can't. But let me give you one last piece of investment advice. When you're in a hole, stop digging." The police arrived moments later. I watched from our front porch as they led him away, still protesting that he could explain everything. My phone buzzed. An email from the tech company. Another major firm had made an acquisition offer. My investment was now worth close to $5 million. Over the next few months, Daniel's life unraveled exactly as expected. He was disbarred. Criminal charges were filed. Our house went into foreclosure due to his secret second mortgage. But I was prepared. I'd already found a beautiful condo in a quieter part of town. I transferred to a new position at my firm, heading up their tech investment division. Life was moving forward. 6 months after Daniel's arrest, I received a letter from him at his court-mandated rehabilitation facility. "I finally understand what happened," he wrote. "I got caught up in the thrill of quick wins and forgot about real value. You were right about everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I regret losing you more than anything else." I folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer. Maybe someday I'd find it in my heart to forgive him. But for now, I had more important things to focus on. My phone rang. The tech company's CEO calling about their upcoming IPO. After hanging up, I sat at my new desk, looking out over the city lights, and opened my grandmother's old jewelry box. Inside was the note she'd left with my inheritance. "Remember, dear one, true wealth isn't about quick gains or lucky breaks. It's about patience, wisdom, and believing in real value. Never let anyone tell you your cautious nature is a weakness. In the long game, the careful investor always wins." I smiled, touching her familiar handwriting. "You were right, Grandma, about everything." Last week, I saw Daniel's name in the paper. He completed his rehabilitation program and was working as a paralegal at a small firm. Unable to practice law but trying to rebuild his life. The article mentioned he was still paying restitution to his former clients. Meanwhile, the tech company went public. My initial $10,000 investment, the one Daniel would have ridiculed as overly cautious and boring, is now worth over $12 million. I've started a foundation in Grandma Rose's name, providing investment education and support for women leaving financially abusive relationships. We teach them about more than just money. We teach them about value, self-worth, and the power of trusting their own judgment. Sometimes I think about that day in Whole Foods, watching the cashier void my groceries while my card was declined. I remember the shame, the confusion, the helplessness. But mostly, I remember the moment I decided to take control of my own destiny. Daniel's gambling addiction destroyed his life, but it also freed me to build something better. In trying to break me, he only proved what I'd known all along. That slow, steady growth beats quick wins every time. Yesterday, I received another acquisition offer for my stake in the tech company. The number made even my experienced eyes widen. As I sat in my office, calculating potential returns, I thought about how far I'd come from that scared woman in the grocery store. I declined the offer. After all, I've learned the most valuable lesson in both business and life. Sometimes the best investment you can make is in yourself.